Okay, so now we get to the inventory form here. And yeah, if you're following along in the book, we're on 4-1 now. There's a little bit of information. I'll just go over a little bit before we actually jump into kind of a demo here of the Excel sheet. So DEP has two templates technically. The first one that we're really going to go over today is this Excel template, and you'll recognize a lot of it from EPA's spreadsheet template that came out, last August or whatever. The states had a advanced copy of that, so that's the one that we tweaked and made it Pennsylvania specific, and some of these smart features like Sabrina mentioned. So that's what we're going to cover today. There is also a Word version for really like for non-communities, but for very small systems with less than 5 service connections. Because they have to fill out a bunch of information per service connection, basically. So there is that Word version of it that will be available here soon. We get frequently in class the question of, do we have to use the DEP form? And no, the systems don't have to. It's not in our reg or anything. So we do get that question, though, frequently, especially from larger systems that might have their own information in GIS already or something like that. And we do have kind of an alternate template for them, just so you know. Okay, so this Excel inventory template that we have, obviously it meets all of our own requirements, and there is this kind of smart feature, like Sabrina said, and I'll show it to you, where it actually gives the line classifications and the tiers for sampling and everything in there. Because of the macros that are built in, it does require Microsoft Excel 2013 or newer. So that's, 10 years old now. We have even a troubleshooting guide for it. We'll give you the email for any trouble you have when you're working with systems for technical issues with the template itself. So we're going to go over this kind of job aid that we have today. And then we also just put out on our website through the DEP YouTube site a tutorial on using the spreadsheet here. Essentially what you're going to see today in this demo, we put out on our YouTube site. So that's linked from the LCRR webpage for DEP, which is really just Google search PADEP LCRR, and it should come up as the first link there. And we've got all these, the job aid and the template and everything. We even have the workbook from this class on the website there. So yeah, you'll see this job aid today. We're coming out with another tutorial as well for the whole non-lead designation that we're going to cover here in a bit as well, verifying that. So, all right, some tools for them to use. So you'll recognize this if you're familiar with the EPA spreadsheet. I like to just kind of give an overview before I jump into the template itself, the demo of how the thing is laid out. If you're not familiar with Excel, it's several worksheets make up this workbook. And of course, they're all accessed with those tabs at the bottom. And this is how it's organized. This was taken from EPA, essentially. We liked how it was color coded and everything. So we carried that over into the Pennsylvania one here. So you have your yellow tabs are the background information where you're not doing any data entry. Then you get into your blue tabs where we're actually going to do the actual data entry. And then that red tab for summary, which has a good summary information. Hey, how many lead service lines you have and that sort of thing. Okay, so now I am going to jump into the demo. If you're following along in your book here, after 4-1, it starts over with page 1. I saw some of you flipping to it already. So that is this kind of instructions we're calling a job aid. And you'll see some of the first parts are what I just went over there. You can kind of follow along in there. So you can make any notes, on that based on the demo and everything here. Whoa. All right, let me just jump out of that here. Okay. So let me kind of just get into the form. And again, if you're familiar with the EPA one, you'll recognize a lot of parts of it here. So the first part starts out with these yellow tabs, which are just for information purposes, as we said. This introduction tab. And like I said, you'll recognize that from that screenshot. And in the job aid here on page 2, it's just the overall what does this, what's the purpose of this template and everything. So we thought that was good information. Now the instructions, we went real deep with these here, very detailed instructions for everything. And I'll show you how you can kind of get back to these, linked back to these real easily when you need them. Because, you know, human nature is to kind of skip past the instructions initially. One key thing is kind of, it says here, start with the general information tab. So, okay, we know to go there first. Continuing along, so I'll come back to those. Class and tier information. Of course, you know, we did this exercise. This is the Pennsylvania version of it here that you saw already. And the cool thing is this spreadsheet will give us these designations that you'll see here in a few. Then Reg Q&A, kept that from EPA's information pretty much, since it's all at the federal level right now. So we liked having that tab in there. So we kept that one. All right, let's get to the blue information tabs then. General information first. Like I said, in the instructions, it says, okay, go here first, because some of this information is carried through to the rest of the spreadsheet, like, you know, the system name, and it uses this initial inventory date and everything. So I just made up this system with 4,000 people. And one thing for our spreadsheet here is only 21 service connections. Well, that's actually tracking the number I've put in so far over on the detailed inventory. So that's a way to kind of check over, you know, what you've already put in there and check it against, oh, I should have this many lines. All these blue cells are ones you can actually input in. This one I can't. That's a, you know, a locked cell there. So, yeah. Okay. Inventory methods. So here we're capturing kind of in general, what were the methods you used to create the inventory. And one piece we haven't talked about in this training so far that EPA has in their guidance document in a couple of places is this level of confidence in records. So we made it so that you can't really describe the records until you select a level of confidence. So that's getting at, you know, do you have low confidence in records? You can barely read them. They were in a flood or something, and then they were scanned. So that would tip you off. EPA talks about in the guidance, you know, to looking at other methods then too, if you have low confidence in those records. I put down here, okay, high confidence in these tap cards. You know, you could do a better description there a bit. We'll talk a little more about high confidence in records, but of course that's what you want to have to know there's solid records. The rest of this, identifying service line material during normal operations, that's stuff that Sabrina and Cheryl went over, and then, you know, getting into the detailed of what methods did you actually use for your service line investigations, whether it was CCTV or whatever. You'll see, though, again, this is kind of in general here, and you'll see how it goes into the detailed inventory here in a moment. So that's it for those tabs. Let me jump to the detailed inventory. So this is where we kind of made our most changes from like EPA's template. You can see it looks a little overwhelming at first with all the colors right off the bat and everything. So in training for systems, well, first of all, I tell them all the data entry here happens in this row 7. So you can't actually enter data down below in this table. I'll show you how we get this stuff down here. All the data entry happens in this row 7. And it's a long spreadsheet going horizontally, though. We keep going. There's the system-owned portion and customer-owned, and then we get to some tap monitoring information. So for training purposes, this isn't in the downloadable spreadsheet. I've got some little diagrams here. So here's our kind of traditional diagram where we've added the VW bus, though, and it just shows for the spreadsheet. First, we're going to tackle these yellow colored cells. Yeah, they look yellow up there. That is the overall service line, you know, kind of both sides of it, but the overall service line. Then we're going to get to, what looks peach down here, kind of tan up there, the system side. Or system-owned portion of the service line, those questions in the template, and then we'll get to the customer side. So just to give, you know, operators a little bit of a feel for how is this thing laid out overall, because it can be a bit overwhelming when you first dive into it. So, okay, let's go back to the beginning of this line 7. One thing that's not in that little diagram are these green cells. So that is where you can't input any information here. That's where it's going to tell us, okay, this is non-lead or is it lead? It's going to tell us the classification. And then it's going to also tell us, do we have sufficient evidence for non-lead? So that's questions that definitely come up, in training. And we'll go over that in detail here, kind of jump out of the demo and go over that. And then we have this sampling tier based on the new LCRR that we'll show you in a bit here as well. So, but the very first thing here is to put in that unique service line ID. That's our first input cell here that we come across. And, Cheryl went over that number. It's not supposed to change and everything. So it has to be that unique ID. But what are our parameters for it? Well, you see a bunch of these are like hyperlinks here in the table. So I'm going to click that, and we linked it back to the instructions, and it takes you right to the instructions for that cell. So that's pretty cool. So now we know, okay, it can contain up to 30 characters, and it says, it's like a database thing, so no spaces, but you can use underscores. You can use periods even if you wanted. We had somebody asking about like coordinates. So there's our parameters for that unique ID. And then when you're done with using the help, you can just click return to form and it takes you back. So that's pretty slick to get people to actually use the help a little bit. All right, so let me come up with some kind of name here. Well, I'm going to use an address, but you have to stuff it all together. No spaces. I'm going to say 10 Robin because it's springtime. That'll be like Robin Road. How about? All right, so it's our initial date replacement would be if this was not an initial. So we're going to stick with joint ownership type here because that is pretty much the most common in Pennsylvania. We've talked to a couple systems where the system owns the entire service line, but in general, for our examples here, we're going to go with joint ownership because there's like a customer side and a system side. So, all right, let me throw in an address here. Robin Road. That can't be real. I'll say it's in Harrisburg. And just so it doesn't get angry when we try to add this, need all that information in there. Okay, so we're in these yellow cells still for the overall service line. Something we have in here is this: is it attached to a school? And I just clicked on it to define school, or is it connected to a child care facility? And it defines those here in the help. It's not like universities or anything. This is looking forward to the sampling requirements for LCRR. It's not really like a required part of the inventory here, but might as well capture the data now, if you can, if you know it. So there's the options there. I'll say no for our example here. Okay, so now we finally get to the system-owned portion as the first part. That those yellow cells was just for the overall service line. So now we finally get to a place where we can select the material. So we're in the system-owned portion, and here are the options. It's kind of hard to see up there. I can't zoom in on that one, but you can select lead, copper. Here's where you can select unknown. We get that question frequently of, how many, can I have a lot of unknowns? As we discussed here a little bit, and Serena talked about, you can put in unknown, likely lead or unlikely lead here. So that can be selected. For our example here, I'm going to try to show it's copper the whole way. So here's where we get into, was material ever previously lead, or is there lead pigtails upstream? That, of course, matters if it's galvanized downstream. I'm going to try to show it's copper here, so I'm going to just say no. But since it's copper, I could say yes. It wouldn't really, spreadsheet wouldn't care. So here's our installation date range, which we talked a lot about. That becomes important, like post 1991, as we've said. So for this part, I'm on the system side. I'm going to say this is a pretty recent install. And so 2004, I'm going to say. So I selected that range, 01 to 10. And that's what the spreadsheet really goes off of. So if they don't know the exact date, I could even just put in here 2004 without the exact date, and it'll be okay with that. Then you select the diameter. You can go to 1 3/4, something. If you want to, 2 inch, whatever. Okay, so now we get over here. We're still on the system side. Now we get to these cells where I'm going to jump out and talk a little more about these. So this is the basis of material classification. Basically, how did we determine that it was copper, and what's our proof there? Let me see. You guys online should now see the PowerPoint here. So yeah, let me talk about this a little bit. And if you're following along in the book here, I think it's page 12 gives the info on the non-lead. It starts on 12 now in this latest version. Yeah, 12 and 13. We'll get into some details here of the sufficient evidence for non-lead. So that's what these next 4 columns are all looking at. Like I said, how did you determine that pipe material? How did you determine it was copper? What's your basis there? So going back to what we've shown you a couple of times here, the different categories. If somebody does, say based on their records, yeah, it's lead or it's galvanized repair and replacement. Okay, the spreadsheet's just going to say, great, what you found that in your record or whatever, that's fine. Where we're really going to look a little more in more detail is this non-lead. If they're saying, yeah, it's copper, it's plastic, whatever, okay, what is your verification then that it doesn't have to be part of the replacement plan and come out of the ground? So let's talk about that and look at it. So yeah, for our example, and I'll get back to that, we're just going to try to show it's copper on both sides, essentially, the whole way here. All right, so what are our methods to verify that it's non-lead? And we kind of grouped them into 3 categories, you could call them here, or 3 segments. The first one being standalone records method, and standalone meaning you don't have to do anything else but look at the records. We'll talk more about each of these here. We have a combination of 2 or more methods, and the methods, that Cheryl went over with the field work and everything. And then we have standalone field methods if kind of as a last resort when they don't have any records and that sort of thing. So we'll talk about each of these a little bit. First, the standalone records method. All right, so it can be records alone are enough to verify what that pipe material is. So that would be if they do a records review and they show that the installation, replacement, whichever, was done after the 1991 lead ban. Because then we're saying, okay, those records, it was after that lead ban, that can be sufficient for all the evidence you need. So this is where that kind of high confidence in records comes in. Shouldn't be just low confidence in those records. So here's an example. Maybe it's a newer development built in 1998. Clearly after the 91 lead ban. So records review is enough there for verification. Similar to if there is some communities put in an ordinance prior to that 91 lead ban. So maybe in the 80s, if they had a local ordinance or codes put in place, and you have that in a community, and then records showing that, okay, this install was after that ordinance was in place. All right, great. That's enough verification for to know that is non-lead. That's copper or whatever the record says. So those are the standalone records methods. So then let's look at when would you need a combination of 2 or more methods? Well, let's say you have records and it's but they're showing it's from 1975 or something. It's prior to any kind of lead ban. So then we look at, well, you'd have to use a combination of 2 or more methods to verify that, essentially. So it's all those methods that Cheryl went over. So as an example, maybe most frequently we'd see a records review in combination with a field verification to verify that record is correct. Could be, one of these others as a mixture of maybe here's where modeling comes into play as well. We're going to talk a little more about statistical analysis and what that means here. So those are the combinations. Let's talk a little more because this could be kind of common. When we're using that combination of methods, and it's field verification, say with records review, what does that field verification entail then to verify that record? All right, well, we'll see in the spreadsheet, the first one is called visual inspection at existing access point. So that most typically might be, inside the house, at the service line coming into the house, maybe in a meter pit if they can get a visual on it. This is separate from using a camera. I think this is purely like with the naked eye at an existing access point there. But that is the next one. If you're combining it with, record reviews, say, you could do CCTV inspection outside the pipe, like Pittsburgh used there, to verify, okay, yeah, that is copper. According to that record, we verify that with the CCTV. Then the mechanical excavation is an alternative to also verify what is there. Remember, in combination with another method, that would be like one on each half of the service line in terms of a mechanical excavation, hydrovac or, backhoe, whatever. So here's an example. Like I said, maybe there's a records review and they find a service line was installed in prior to any kind of lead ban, 1965, or say here. So they verify those records. Here's their two methods: records review plus the field verification. And so they excavate one location on the system side to verify that record. And then you could do a visual inspection inside the home on that side, on the customer side, to verify that record. So when systems, we're doing this in class, a lot of, okay, I have records, but I still have to tear up like my entire neighborhood or something like that. We're going to also allow, though, some representative field verification. So where's this come into play? Well, in those circumstances, you have good records from an area that was all built or maybe redone at the same time, just kind of, those lines should be similar, like a neighborhood. You can field verify a statistically sound subset. And we're using that language from Michigan's work. And as a matter of fact, that's what we're pulling this from. Michigan EGLE, their method for representative verification. So, again, using Google, EGLE service line verification brings up their this document, minimum service line material verification. So they get into essentially, if it's an area with less than 1,500 service connections, you can field verify 20% of those, and they also get into how to kind of randomly select those locations, so you're not having any bias in selecting those locations. So that's something that'll really help out systems rather than have to do like the whole neighborhood. We'll look at that statistically sound subset. Again, if they have, records that they're verifying, essentially, is key there. So yeah, that's why I put that up there. Only use to verify existing records still. Now, if they have nothing, then they really shouldn't use the 20%. All right, so then we come back to our last kind of method here. If they don't have any records and nothing else to go by, then it comes down to some standalone field methods. So Cheryl went over that CCTV inspection inside the whole pipe length that some communities did use successfully. That's a possibility. Or again, we took this from Michigan's work, the good old mechanical excavation at 3 locations across the length of the service line. And this is on page 13 in the manual there. So what does the 3-point verification entail if they have pretty much nothing else to go on here? First point, 1 point is curb stop to the building. Another point, curb stop to the main. So we're going out that way. Now those points have to be 18 inches or more from the curb stop because of, again, what Michigan saw with those splices just at the curb stop. And so we're going 18 inches out, and beyond to do some of those points there. Now, the third point can be inside the home where the service line enters, or the wording is like another point along the longer section. So that's where, that third point comes in, but in the home is a valid point for that there. So the 3-point, again, when there's like no other options to, you're not verifying records or anything, you have to fall back to something like that. Now, to see if any questions are coming in, or to maybe even jog any more questions, if you go to the very back of the manual on 4.2, it's the last page, there is 4 questions for you to go through and try out based on this information we just covered here. Then we'll get back to the spreadsheet. Right. Let's go over these here. Let's see. So the first one was this ABC, not very creative name. High confidence interval records from summer of '94 residential area. Is this sufficient evidence for each service line to be designated as non-lead in this residential area? What do you guys think? I hear mostly yes. We were going this yes there. It's sufficient for the initial inventory. Evidence shows that it was installed after the 91 lead ban there. So that one was intended to be kind of straightforward there. This raging river water system. So all their service line records were wiped out in this great flood of 1990. But they had an ordinance from 1986 prohibiting the installation of lead pipes. Then we have a development built in 1988. So are these records sufficient evidence for a non-lead designation of the service lines? The way I asked the question there, it's yes, sufficient for the non-lead designation, but they would still have to look at those specific materials technically for our inventory to comply with those system map requirements. So it's kind of what we're getting into with that last. The third one then got into this joint ownership, service lines with the homeowner. But they records show the complete service line was installed in 1979. So as part of their investigation, they went into each home and visually inspected the service line entering the house. So it was determined the entire neighborhood as copper service line entering the house. Is this sufficient evidence to designate the entire service line as non-lead? All right, I see no heads shaking here in the room. And right, that was the idea here of this one, is that we wanted to just talk about the idea that they have to verify the system-owned portion as well here still. So, all right, the last one got into the 3-point excavation. They did one excavation and found it was lead. Do they need to continue with the other points? I see some head shaking no here again. Correct. So that's the idea of, okay, the whole service line is going to be designated as lead then for replacement. Now they could keep going to see if, oh, maybe on one half of it, it's not going to have to be replaced. But we know for the spreadsheet, it is going to be designated as lead for the whole thing. All right. Let me know if there's any questions, other questions. Otherwise, I'm going to hop back to the demo here too. So coming back to our example, since it's been a little while, another tab I have here. This is what we're going to try to show in our spreadsheet here. So we have, as I said in the first part of it, we were just working on the system-owned side when we hopped out of the demo here. So we're looking at copper that was replaced in 2004. So now we know that records alone should be enough for that. It was after the 91 lead ban. But let's say, for our example here, that at the time, they kept the original copper on the customer-owned side, which was installed in 1975. So they did kind of like a partial replacement. So now we know on that customer-owned side, we essentially need to verify those records. We can't just use records alone because it was prior to any kind of lead ban. So they had records, and then they'll back that up with a visual inspection inside the home as that option, existing access point. So that's what we'll try to show in our spreadsheet here. So let me go back to the detailed inventory. All right, I'm still on the customer or the system-owned side in peach here when I hopped out, and we said that was from 2004, and we'll do a records review. So our magic spreadsheet still just says answer all customer-owned questions now. Now it says I'm still on the system side. But we'll leave that as just the records review, because that was all we should need on that. Now we finally get to our customer-owned portion. So I just showed you that. We're going to try to show it's copper. And, oh, it changes to non-lead, but for sufficient evidence, it still says answer all questions. Okay. There's not a lead pigtail upstream. We'll say, okay, so the date range, we knew this was 1975. So 71 to 80. And I'll put in, we had a really good record here, this one. 4/1/1975. Okay, so we said we did a records review that we found that. And okay, when I click on records review alone, it says sufficient evidence for lead. No. Um, of course, I haven't answered what else we've done yet, but we know that records alone is not enough because it was 1975. So we need that second method. And we said that we did a visual inspection at existing access point inside the house where it entered there. Okay, it switched to yes for us. So now we have non-lead and sufficient evidence. We got to put in a date that we did that. I'll say it was last year. Okay. So now, all right, we've got all that. The last piece in our spreadsheet here is kind of we just set it up in the spreadsheet for assigning tap monitoring tiering. So let's see what it does here in terms of in our magic spreadsheet here of what tier we will be. So we're attached to a single family residence. We'll say, is there any point of entry treatment present? Of course, it wouldn't like that. It would say that's a bad sampling location if there was. All right, so it already says it's a tier 5 location. If they know if there's interior lead solder, I mean, you can put not sure here, certainly. In fact, I'll leave it at that. Currently a site, I'll say no. All right, so that's just kind of some bonus information there. So finally, we get with this button, add to inventory. We've come all the way across row 7 here to add to inventory. So I'll click that and it does its little thing here and it puts it as the top row in the bottom of the spreadsheet here. Here's the other lines I've done previously, but here's our 10 Robin and it's a non-lead and everything is down there. So like I said, all the data entry happens in that row 7. Once it's down here, you can't actually edit it. I just clicked on that and it says, it's protected. So first of all, if you realize, oh, I made a mistake or I want to pull that one back up, all you do is type it in this unique service line ID again. So 10 Robin, I didn't have anything else on that, right? Hit enter and it'll bring it back up. So then I can make any changes or anything to it here. And then you would just click add inventory again and it'll take those changes. One thing I'll do to show you part of the spreadsheet here too is it's got some good error messages built into it. So let's say I had forgotten to put in the date of field verification. Excuse me. I'll put that in or take it out and then click add to inventory. It says errors found. All right, it's a pretty good error message. Column AG, date of field verification, required if field verification performed, enter it in this format. So now I know, okay, I better do that. So it's got some good error messages. We worked with our IT folks to actually get some decent messages in there. And I'll even change the date of it here. Because that's a way you can make a change. Then you just click add inventory again. So it's another way, you can see how you can pull things up there. If you're helping a system with this and they have a whole, street neighborhood that's very, very much the same. Let's say, there's the next house is 12 Robin. So I'll pull 10 Robin back up, Robin Road, and it pulls that up. I can keep all that same information if I just now change that unique ID to 12, let's say. Whoops, or 1. Okay, I've changed it to 1. And change the address. And I could now click add inventory with all that same information. If it was all the same, it's the same street. And boom, I've just quickly added another service line. So now I've got 10 and 1 in there. So that's a way, just using that way of pulling up an existing one and then change the information a little bit, unique ID or whatever, to kind of quickly bang through putting a bunch in there. So the idea here is we've got it in there now for DEP's purposes here. What you do is when you're all set here, you have it ready. You click this Export All to CSV button, and that actually creates a CSV file, tells you where it is. It puts it in a folder on your machine, and it tells you where it is here. And we are creating a interface so that systems can just get on to, similar to like the Dweller interface, and upload their inventory to DEP here. So it spits out this, it made this folder on my desktop, and it's very much like a database thing that you can't. Uh-oh, is that an old one? Oh, that's inventory methods. That was the inventory methods tab. It spits out for each of those blue tabs. So here's the detailed inventory. So it's got all that data in there, and it uses these, like U means something, and so it's what the database will accept here. So this is, if systems are using their own spreadsheet, we give them a template of like what we would need that looks similar to this. But yeah, that's what it spits out here, and what you're gonna be, systems will be asked to upload to DEP. That system is in the works here. Questions on the spreadsheet while I'm in that. You can see, maybe if you're familiar with the EPA one, kind of the differences of some of the things it does for them. So it can be very helpful in terms of giving that classification and everything. That, yeah, so the question is, can you can't really, can you copy and paste from, like, say, another database even? And that is the disadvantage, and why people ask a lot about, is there another spreadsheet we can use? So anybody who wants to do that, essentially, they have to use our alternative one, and then get all the formatting in the right format there that we give them. Because all data entry does have to happen in this row 7. I mean, technically, I think the easiest way to do a little bit of speed is just to pull up that last one and then change what you need. Otherwise, you can copy and paste one row at a time. It does allow you to do that from down below, but there's really no point, because you can just call it up with that unique ID. So it's still one at a time, no matter what. So just some final closing slides here. Like I said, we are working on this portal, essentially, where you'll upload the CSV files to DEP. So systems will do that, and that's how we'll get all of our information into our own Padwis system and everything. If you are, I know with this group, really working with this spreadsheet, the DEP Excel spreadsheet. But if you're outside of this or something, we do have this other spreadsheet template with the required fields we would need if you're not using the DEP one. We have, larger systems asking for that.
Yes.
But there is our information, and the RA Padwis you'll see in the job aid as well. That's where we're asking anybody with like technical questions on the spreadsheet to email that resource account.